The World Health Organization has greatly expanded its power and influence since the start of the pandemic, and this unelected global health agency's quest for power hasn't been limited to healthcare. Since 2020, the WHO has partnered with numerous social media platforms, shaped their rules, and influenced what billions of people are allowed to say. In 2021, it instructed WHO members, who by the way represent 98% of all the countries in the world, to start working on an international pandemic treaty, which is also referred to as an accord. And in 2022, the Biden administration sent the WHO its proposed amendments to the 2005 International Health Regulations, or IHR for short. Collectively, the pandemic treaty and these proposed IHR amendments will give the WHO new powers to target so-called misinformation and push global surveillance. The WHO intends to finalize them by May 2024. Yet despite amassing major power and influence in just a few short years, the WHO's thirst for power doesn't look like it will ever be quenched. During this year's World Health Assembly, the annual meeting of the WHO's decision-making body, representatives at the meeting pushed for even more expansive powers. One of the most shocking proposed power grabs came from Dr. Abdullah Asiri, the co-chair of the group that's working on amendments to the IHR, who urged WHO members to prioritize, quote, actions that may restrict individual liberties.
The world, however, requires a different level of legal mandates, such as the pandemic treaty, to navigate through a particular pandemic, should one occur, and it will. Prioritizing actions that may restrict individual liberties, mandating and sharing of information, knowledge and resources, and most importantly, providing fund for pandemic control efforts are all necessary during a pandemic.
Another WHO member suggested that the unelected health agency should run a simulation exercise before implementing the pandemic treaty.
We feel very strongly that we cannot wait for the next emergency to find out how well the pandemic accord and the IHR amendments will work. We need to know now. We therefore suggest that member states, together with other key stakeholders, carry out a simulation exercise based on the draft accord and the draft IHR amendments later this year, before they are finalized and adopted. It can provide assurance of their effectiveness, help us all as a global community to identify any remaining gaps, and resolve any outstanding areas of disagreement. A simulation exercise beforehand and robust monitoring and accountability following their adoption are two ways you can ensure these important instruments fulfill their potential and that we are ready for the next pandemic.
This suggestion is eerily similar to the scenario that played out before the censorship of the New York Post's Hunter Biden laptop story, just a few weeks before the 2020 U.S. presidential election. 1 month before the story was published, Facebook and Twitter execs and several reporters attended an event where they practiced how to handle, quote, fake Hunter Biden docs. The tech platforms that attended this event ended up swiftly censoring the real Hunter Biden laptop story a month later, and many journalists downplayed or ignored it. Several speakers at the World Health Assembly also urged the WHO to take more action against dissenting voices. The WHO representative for the Bahamas claimed that, quote, dissenting voices can clutter the airwaves and derail the public health good with disinformation and misinformation, before urging the WHO to, quote, nullify the conspiracies.
Madam Chair, as we witnessed with the COVID vaccines, dissenting voices can clutter the airwaves and derail the public health good with disinformation and misinformation. In this vein, the Bahamas urges WHO to develop robust, effective risk communication messaging around not only the process to review the IHR, but also the value in doing so. Notwithstanding the access availability of the documents on the WHO's website, more is needed to nullify the conspiracies and calm the disquiet.
Professor Peter Piot, a former director of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and a Honda professor of global health, urged the WHO to do more to combat so-called fake news.
But equally important, as was mentioned by also former Prime Minister Dern, the declining trust in science, technology, and in actions and solutions for public health is extremely worrisome and is also very damaging for health of the people. And this is something that we as a public health community and as WHO, we must invest with the same energy as those who are spreading the fake news and are undermining all these efforts. And it's true for tobacco, it's true for vaccines, it's true for so many.
And WHO Director General Dr. Tedros urged members to counter mis- and disinformation about the pandemic treaty.
Likewise, the continuing negotiations on the pandemic accord and amendments to the international health regulations are an unprecedented opportunity to learn from the mistakes of the COVID-19 pandemic and ensure they are not repeated. Your challenge as member states is to negotiate a strong accord for approval just 12 months from now. This accord is a generational opportunity that we must seize. We are the generation that lived through the COVID-19 pandemic, so we must be the generation that learns the lessons it taught us and makes the changes to keep future generations safer. In particular, we must work hard to counter the mis- and disinformation about the accord that's circulating in many member states. We cannot mince words. The idea that this accord will cede authority to WHO is simply fake news. This is an accord by member states, for member states, and will be implemented in member states in accordance with their own laws.
Although the pandemic treaty says it won't cede authority to the WHO, it does recognize, quote, the central role of WHO as the directing and coordinating authority on international health work in pandemic prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery of health systems. The fact that these World Health Assembly speakers see themselves as authorities on combating misinformation is particularly ironic when you consider that the WHO is infamous for pushing misleading information during the early stages of the COVID pandemic. In a January 2020 tweet, the Global Health Agency amplified a claim from Chinese authorities that there was, quote, no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the coronavirus. The WHO also published several documents during the World Health Assembly that pushed for further expansions of its powers to target speech and conduct surveillance. One of these documents outlined the agency's plans for collaborative surveillance and, quote, infodemic management. Infodemic is a WHO buzzword that describes, quote, too much information, including false or misleading information in digital and physical environments during a disease outbreak. Another of these documents detailed the WHO's plans to expand One Health as part of a 5-year plan between 2022 and 2026. One Health is a WHO system that uses links between, quote, the health of people, animals, and ecosystems to, quote, create new surveillance and disease control methods. A third document described how the WHO, quote, continues to support the response to coronavirus disease, COVID-19, by strengthening surveillance. Not only did the WHO vie for even more power at the World Health Assembly, but it also demanded that member states, many of which are experiencing difficult economic conditions at home, provide hundreds of millions of dollars in additional funding to the Global Health Agency.
I leave you with 3 requests. First, I urge every member state to work with the Secretariat, identify concrete ways to pick up the pace of progress on the 3 billion targets and health-related SDGs. Second, I urge every member state to engage constructively and urgently in negotiations on the pandemic accord and the international health regulations, so the world will never again have to face the devastation of a pandemic like COVID-19. And third, I ask you to support the increase in assessed contribution and support the replenishment, the investment round in 2024. As we celebrate WHO's 75th anniversary, let us commit to do even more together to promote health, keep the world safe, and serve the vulnerable.
Member states complied with these demands by agreeing to pay an additional 20% to the WHO in 2024 to 2025. Member states are already set to pay the WHO more than $950 million in dues for 2022-2023. So this 20% increase represents an increase of almost $200 million. These seemingly endless WHO demands for more power and money faced little resistance at the World Health Assembly. Instead, the WHO's most prominent members expressed full support for the International Health Agency during the meeting. U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Service Javier Becerra, an unelected bureaucrat who was appointed by President Joe Biden with the consent of the U.S. Senate, said that the U.S. is committed to the work of the WHO's intergovernmental negotiating body. That's the group that's drafting the pandemic treaty and the IHR amendments.
Preparedness priorities that include the following 5 goals. Strengthen biosurveillance and data systems for early warning to biological threats.
Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Theresa Tam, said it's, quote, absolutely amazing to have the chairs of the INB and the IHR review, and that Canada is, quote, committed to taking a collaborative approach with multiple partners on shared health priorities.
And I think it's absolutely amazing to have the chairs of the INB and the IHR review, and also those playing an incredible role in facilitating the next high-level meeting. I think from Canada's perspective, we're definitely committed to taking a collaborative approach with our multiple partners on shared health priorities, and we see the urgency of what we need to do at this very pivotal moment, and that solving global problems needs the whole world to work together. I think that the work to strengthen the global architecture for health emergency preparedness, response, and resilience should be grounded in a multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder approach. But health leadership is absolutely critical, and that the WHO should absolutely be at the center and playing a really critical role in this global health architecture.
The WHO representative for France expressed full commitment to the pandemic agreement and the IHR amendments and said that both are vital. She added that France supports the pandemic treaty, being guided by One Health.
France is very much committed to the work underway on global health architecture, and this is a very historic and important moment for us for global health architecture. This negotiation process is led by states, and it's taking place in a number of negotiating fora. Of course, here at the World Health Organization, which is at the heart of these negotiations, and to gather the international community, we need to be inclusive, and it is the case. It concerns stakeholders and states, but it also requires rigorous coordination. With regard to the pandemic agreement, together with the European Union, France is fully committed for a binding agreement which will enable us to better prevent and prepare with early detection systems zoonoses, and to guarantee access to medical countermeasures by ensuring local and regional capacity building, and to be guided by the principle of One Health, with a link between human health, animal health, and the health of ecosystems. In parallel, we have the amendment of the IHR, and France is also invested in this process, and these two processes are complementary. They are vital for ensuring a new framework to prevent and prepare for new pandemics. That is incumbent upon all of us.
The WHO's requests for more power and money were rubber-stamped at this year's World Health Assembly, are an alarming but inevitable manifestation of the agency's structure. The representatives that get to vote on WHO power grabs are mostly unelected bureaucrats who are appointed by heads of state. In most countries, these representatives can't be voted out by citizens, and the country's other elected officials have no powers to approve, reject, or remove them. This structure makes it almost impossible for citizens or elected officials to curb the WHO's ever-expanding powers or cut its budget. Since WHO representatives don't have to worry about being held accountable by citizens or elected officials, they have little incentive to carry out the will of the people in the countries that they represent. Instead, they're most likely to serve the interests of the bureaucracy that they're part of by making decisions that give the WHO more money and power. And because this structure promotes endless power-seeking, it's inevitable that this unelected health agency will attempt to seize power in areas that extend far beyond its remit of building a healthier, safer world. The WHO has no business interfering with individual liberties, speech that it deems to be misinformation or the speech of its critics. But until significant structural changes are made, it will continue to put its thirst for power ahead of the rights and freedoms of individual citizens. Thanks for checking out this video report. If you support free speech, freedom from surveillance, and digital civil liberties, join Reclaim the Net. Become a supporter by going to reclaimthenet.org and sign up now.